and pleased to present another class from the Chai Academy. Chai Academy, of course, is a slew of classes that we've given over the period of a few months, and we are committed to continuing until hopefully there's hundreds upon hundreds. There's probably 100 now or something. One can always get to the classes, to watch and review the classes, see the classes, see what's available at thechaicenter.com/academy. So we are just a short 11 days before Rosh Hashanah, and we started last week before the break. We started Maimonides' laws of Teshuva, laws of return, repentance, and we discussed then that Teshuva is the 3R method of Teshuva. Essentially, there's regret, remorse, and resolve. So one has to feel sorry for what they did, and really regret it, articulate it, and then resolve not to do it. So part of Teshuva is that you have to. It's not between you and anybody else. It's between you and God of what you've done, and you have to you have to articulate, and you have to itemize the sin, and that is why on Yom Kippur the sins are itemized. So that way it helps you. Hey, shalom, shalom. That way it helps one to really figure out what what to confess on. Now, of course, as Maimonides will say, is that any time is good for Teshuvah. Any time. One does not have to wait for Yom Kippur, but one could do it anytime. It's an auspicious time, obviously, to do it on Yom Kippur. But the reason why we're studying now, because is we're about to go into Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the new year, where God decrees for each and every one of us and of all creation what type of a year you're going to have. Obviously, last year, Rosh Hashanah, God, for whatever reason, decreed that we were going to have the 10 plagues, and COVID just being one of them. But so therefore, what we want to do is we want to get our Teshuvah done, our basics done, before Rosh Hashanah, because we want a good year. So while it's true that the bottom line, God forgives on Yom Kippur, we still want to make peace and friendship and get God to smile on us on Rosh Hashanah, so He'll give us a good year. So that's why we're talking about Teshuvah now. So we discussed that one has to itemize. We discussed that that Teshuva can forgive for everything, and as long as you're sincere and you itemize it, then you'll be forgiven. You'll be forgiven. God is not like a human being. A human being, you could hurt him, and then ask forgiveness, and they'll forgive you, and then you can hurt him again, and they'll be more reluctant to forgive, and you can hurt them again, even more reluctant, until finally they'll say, go take a long walk off a short pier. God forgives every day. I think there's two types of forgiveness, right, in general with human being. And whatever we have down here is because we have it up there. We have it with our relationship with God. But if you think about it, there's two types of forgiveness. There's forgiveness where you want to forgive because you want the relationship. So somebody hurt you, let it go, right? I'm not gonna fight over this. Then there's the other type of relationship where you don't want to let it go, but because someone said they're sorry, you may even surprise yourself and forgive them. Same is true with God. There's some things God just lets go. Right? God recognizes you're human. To human is to err, and to err is to, it could be upsetting, but it's a human frailty. I don't think there's anybody gone through this world that hasn't aired, right? Um, but there's also sins that God says no. But when you ask, you're forgiven. So that's why the asking is so important. Basically stating that God, I have, I've seriously made a mistake, and I want to be forgiven. So I got, like today in the mail, I got a very sharp letter. Somebody who, no fault of my own, I'm very upset, very very upset. Nothing to do with me, to do with his lot in life, but lashing out at me, I guess. My goal is to ask him forgiveness on behalf of Judaism or whatever, and see if I can make him feel better. Now, Maimonides continues. So once again, one should detail and itemize the forgiveness. Maimonides says that basically there are 5 things or 5 paths of repentance. The first one is to cry out to God, right? And so for the person who's repenting, the penitent, is to cry out to God and say, I've done some terrible things. I've made some mistakes. I had poor judgment. Please, 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 I'm asking for forgiveness. The other path is to give charity, right? Charity is according to one's potential, is a way to gain forgiveness. In the times of the Holy Temple, if a person had sinned, what needed to happen is they had to bring a sin offering. So in lieu of a sin offering, today we give charity, right? The third thing one needs to do is distance themselves from the thing that made them commit the sin. So whatever the object of the sin is, you distance yourself, right? It's almost, in a court of law, sometimes they'll say, okay, you're restricted. You can no longer go back into the jewelry business because you stole diamonds. So you have to do anything but jewelry. So too, here's you have to, in order to help yourself, you stay away. So if there was a sexual indiscretion, stay away from that person, right? You have to change your behavior entirely. You have to develop a new attitude. That until now I sinned. Why did I sin? Because either I could care less, I was negligent, I was arrogant, I legitimately I didn't think it through. It was just a bad call. So the idea is that one has to change their persona. So think things through before you do something. Before you yell at your spouse, think it through. Is this a mitzvah to do? Chances are it's not. Now, so we spoke about confessional. We spoke about the only confessional you do to God, right? You only speak to God. Maimonides clarifies it. Maimonides, so he adds an extra thing. He said that that if you've sinned against a person, then you need to go over to that person and articulate and identify and itemize, right, your sin to that person. And you can even say it publicly, that you'll remember last week what I did. Well, I did to this person. I did X, Y, and Z. So I want to apologize to that person, and that's so when you go so even though he says confessional is between you and God, that still stands. However, if there's a sin between yourself and a fellow person, you should really itemize the sins between you and your fellow person. And publicly is fine. Sins between you and God, things that were done in clandestinely, or things that so you quickly grabbed a cheeseburger one day, that nobody needs to know. In fact, it's arrogance. That's between you and God. You don't tell your rabbi, you don't tell anybody else, you just God, and God knows, right? And it's not really a benefit to publicize the sins and the transgressions, the errors, the misjudgments, um, the poor judgments of you and God. But to a fellow man, because you can say, hey, Johnny, I want to apologize to you. And Johnny could say, what for? So there may be many, right? Or then maybe Johnny doesn't even know some of the stuff, so he can't forgive if he doesn't know. So, well, I spoke behind your back. So now Johnny knows, and he forgives. So Maimonides says a time where the most important time, or the opportune time to do teshuvah is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because those are considered, starting Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, are considered the 10 days of repentance. Once again, you should do it anytime, and as I said before, approaching Rosh Hashanah is good to get your relationship back on track with God. But he says God basically is awaiting for your teshuvah on those days. And on Yom Kippur, he forgives. So it's an amazing gift if you think about it, Yom Kippur. And I say this often, and I feel this, I believe this, is that 25 hours, so you don't eat. It's not always so easy. So you don't drink, right? There are some that have to eat and drink, diabetics, eating disorders, etc. Those that they may have to eat, but for the most part, we don't eat, we don't drink, and we follow. By the way, we follow our doctor, and that's all it is. And you're in shore for 25 hours. So those 25 hours, you're not reading the Wall Street Journal, you're not checking on your stock portfolio, you are not making business calls. You dedicate that day, those 25 hours, and 8 of 10 of them you're sleeping. So those 15 hours, 16 hours, you dedicate to God. It's such a small price to pay to be forgiven. And as long as you're sincere, you're forgiven. So what an incredible concept. What an incredible concept. Right? That one is forgiven. And Teshuva Lakoil, as Maimonides says, everybody's forgiven. And therefore, since it is a day of forgiveness, you're obligated. One is obligated to do Teshuva. Right? And Maimonides says that we begin, and we know this from practice, we know this from, it alludes in the Torah, that we begin at night. We don't just wait for that's why I say 25 hours. So let's say, as this year Yom Kippur comes in Sunday night, Monday, so you begin Sunday night. Maimonides adds that you should begin even before Sunday night. Sunday twilight, you start. So in case the meal that you're eating, God forbid, you choke, and you need to go to hospital, God forbid. So he says at least you'll get your teshuvah done even before. So and in fact, the evening service, the morning service, the afternoon service, the mincha service, all have the al-chet, the itemized, short and long version of sin itemization. So we do that, and we think about our sins. I always tell people when they're in synagogue, or this year you may not be in synagogue because of the nuttiness, that's the order of the day. Is that you really spend time on those al-chets, on those itemized confessionals. And even if you're in synagogue and the cantor has moved on, so what? Your job is not to pay lip service and get through hundreds of pages. Your job, my job, collective job, is to basically itemize those al-chets, those, right, for the sin of. And once again, when we say it plural. Because we may not have sinned, but maybe a family member sinned. Our family member may not have sinned, but maybe somebody sinned. Maybe somebody you know didn't sin with this, but there may be somebody, some Jew in the world, or some non-Jew in the world that has sinned, and you ask God for forgiveness for all. Um, and we do, and once again, so we do it at least 4 times, and then there's the 5th prayer in Yom Kippur as the gates are closing. We do the short confessional. We do it one more time, just one last chance. So Yom Kippur, the order of the day, Rosh Hashanah is praying for a good year. Yom Kippur is praying for forgiveness. And the ingredient is confessional and sincerity. Right? That is the ingredient. And once again, because God is not human, the next year, Rosh Hashanah, you do it again. But if God was a mortal king and you come to him and say, God, you know what? I watered down the orange juice again, and I sold it for pure oranges. Again? God is not like that. God said, okay, so will you do it again? No. And that's all. And you're forgiven. It's interesting. The Mishnah says that even if somebody says, I'm gonna commit a sin and do tshuva later. So while that is arrogance and chutzpah, bottom line is, if you're sincere, you can still get over that hump. Right? Bottom line is that when it comes to teshuva, the person says, you know, that was a terrible thing for me to do. That was a sass move. That was skunky. And I'm actually sorry I did that. And really sorry, sincerely sorry I did that. God will forgive for that too. So nothing stands in the way of teshuva. Nothing. And what brilliance, 25 hours. Maimonides continues, and this is important. Maimonides says teshuva is sins between you and God. It will only help the sins between you and God. If you stole from somebody and that person is still owed the money and you have not pacified the person, Yom Kippur will not help. If you hit somebody, if you insulted somebody, if you were rude, unkind, or whatever to somebody, you need to set that record straight for you to be forgiven. And it's not a matter of just giving back the money you stole, but you have to mollify, you have to pacify the individual. And it doesn't matter what it is. Between you and God, so you ate a cheeseburger, tell God I ate a cheeseburger, I'm sorry. Right? But and God will forgive. Once again, sincerity trumps, and you're forgiven. But between man to man, when I say man to mankind, woman to man to woman, etc., you have to really clear that up with the individual first. And therefore, it has become the custom that between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you call up people that you may possibly have hurt and ask them for forgiveness. You know, I'll tell you a very, very interesting story. It's somewhat humorous, actually, but I got a call a few weeks ago, maybe it's a couple months ago now. It's a fellow, it was an international call, and it was from a fellow in England, London, England. He now lives out of London, but we were together in London, England in school. I emigrated when I was 13 to the United States. He called me and he said, in 1979, remember, we're now 2020, right? In 1979, I hurt your finger. I banged my hand down and you had to wear a splint on your finger. So I was all of 11, right? Something like that. And I'm sorry, and I want to ask your forgiveness. So I said to him, you know, it's like 40 something. I told him I don't remember it, and of course I forgive you, but it's 40 something years later. He goes, I've developed arthritis in my hand, and I'm trying to trace it back as to why. Now, I don't know if he can do that about himself, he can say, okay, I hurt somebody's finger, so my finger hurts. Let me ask forgiveness. He goes, I didn't think about it till recently. I haven't thought about it, since I did it. I was a kid. But I've been thinking about it, and I came to the conclusion I need to give you a call. Anyway, we had a good laugh. We didn't have to reconcile. It was nothing. We reconnected, and reunited, and I'm in touch with him. And I sent him a picture of me, sent him a picture of him. It was interesting. Now, I could never say your finger hurts because of what you did to me. I can never say you're hurting in business because of what you did to me. I can never say that. An individual can meditate, and an individual can postulate, but I can't. He did, and that's the conclusion he came to. Is he right? Is he wrong? That's God's domain, and I have no idea. He felt he needed to make the call. To me, ludicrous. He didn't have to make the call. I didn't even remember it, but right, he did. So the bottom line is you have to reach out to the person you've hurt, and ask the person to forgive you and pacify them. Now, if you ask them once, and they say no, I'll never forgive you. You're obligated to ask them again. You ask them twice, and they say, I'll never forgive you. You ask them a third time. If after the third time, you ask them, and the third time should be done publicly, you gather a few people around and say, in front of these people, I know I hurt you, and they don't forgive you, well, the onus now becomes on them. They've done the wrong thing. You've asked 3 times, and they haven't forgiven you. So the question is, how do they expect God to forgive them? They refuse to forgive, but they expect to be forgiven. So after 3 times, you are no longer obligated to ask. They now are in the wrong, and you've done what you needed to do. So one should be quick to forgive, because we want others to quickly forgive us. We want God to forgive us. So we need to forgive. We're only obligated to ask 3 times. Someone just asked, if they tell you you're dead to me, you ask 3 times. After 3 times. Now, there is a difference, however, if it is one's rabbi, one's teacher that you've hurt, you have to go back. You have to get that forgiveness. It doesn't say parent. It's interesting, because in the Torah, it doesn't say love your parent. It says honor your parent. Some parents, and they say things that are so hurtful, cannot be loved. You still have to honor them. And you still have to, I'm sorry if I did anything to you. And a parent has to ask forgiveness from their child. There's absolutely nothing wrong. And in fact, it's right. If a parent hurt their child, remember, a parent is human too. And a parent doesn't act motherly or fatherly, they have to ask forgiveness. Right? And it's very healing to have to ask forgiveness from your child. It's hard. It's forgiving for the child. Basically, if they feel that they've been hurt so badly by you've stabbed them, asking them, telling them you're sorry takes out the knife. It's called taking out the knives, and you do it to a child. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. Been there, done that. So a person is not allowed to be stubborn and cruel, and even if somebody really hurts you, you shouldn't make them ask forgiveness more than 3 times. At the 3rd time, they're not obligated to come back. Now, what happens if you didn't get to ask for forgiveness for this person and they passed? Right? So one should go actually to the place they're buried and ask them forgiveness from their place of burial. You approach the grave, approach the stone, or whatever it may be, and say, and you say your name, have wronged you, and I know where you are right now. You're not in the same place as you were when you were alive. and I ask you forgiveness. So therefore, isn't it? So therefore, even if you've asked them 3 times and they no longer forgive you, and they say no, I don't forgive you, if they precede you, if they pass before you, even so, this is the fourth and final time, you asking forgiveness from the grave. It's the right thing to do. Someone asked a question. Eileen asked a question. Isn't the nature of a rabbi to forgive? A rabbi is in the same boat as everybody else. It's the nature of a human being to forgive. Right? If you and look at it this way, if a person doesn't, if you don't forgive that person, and it's the nature. By the way, one of the things the Mishnah says is a Jewish person is by nature forgives easy. Human beings by nature forgive easy. There are isolated individuals that don't forgive easy, and they're wrong. Right? But you have to forgive easy. So it's not just a rabbi forgiving. It's everybody has to be forgiving. Right? Everybody has to be forgiving. Sometimes you find rabbis are the toughest nuts, to be honest. Sometimes you find rabbis who are nuts. But sometimes you find rabbis who are the toughest nuts. And they don't forgive, and they bear a grudge, and it's terrible. But they're just being human. But one has to forgive, right? Somebody writes a great point. You can forgive, but you don't have to trust. Yeah. You can forgive, but never put yourself in the position again to be hurt. But you got to forgive wholeheartedly. So if somebody steals from you, your partner steals from you, you can forgive him. You don't have to partner up with them again. Once again, you don't want to create the same challenges. So you forgive. Once again, sorry is a very magical word. Sorry is an incredible word. It's so powerful. You go to the grave and ask for forgiveness from the grave. So that's either you hadn't get a chance to ask them forgiveness in their lifetime, or you've asked them 3 times, they didn't forgive you. You go to their grave and just square it away. And I've actually seen it done. I was visiting the Rebbe's grave, and there was somebody's grave nearby, and this person came with a few people. Must have been 3-4 people there. And he said out loud, and he said the name. He said, so and so and so and so. I hereby publicly ask you for forgiveness. I did wrong by you, and I don't want there to be baggage that you have to deal with, etc. And they asked for forgiveness. So I've witnessed it. It was amazing. But realize one thing I was about to say, and I got sidetracked. That if you don't forgive a person, then they are occupying space in your brain rent-free. If you forgive him, it's over. If you don't forgive him, then it's always here. It's always here. Whenever you see him, you get irked. Forgive him. It's better for you. Forget about them. It's better for you to forgive him. It's easier on your heart. It's easier on your psyche. It's easier on you to forgive him. That's a very, very important point here, is that it's a favor not only to them, but it's probably a bigger favor to you as well. So forgive, forget wholeheartedly, move on, begin the year anew, and don't be stubborn when someone asks you forgiveness. So hereby I ask anybody forgiveness if I've hurt anybody here, etc., etc. And it's extremely cathartic. So one of the things that we said was that once you give tzedakah, so I just the Chai Center is not the Chai Center. This is a separate organization. I happen to be involved in. I happen to have a big, it's amazing. It's called the Friendship Circle, and they are having a fundraiser today. And it is an incredible organization. It's for children with special needs. So if you can make a donation today, it could be a small one. It's www.safefriendship.org/NY Friendship Circle. So www.safefriendship.org/New York NY Friendship Circle. that would be great. They do so many different things for children with special needs, and they're really changing a generation. There's, the kids with special needs are no longer called the R word. They're no longer looked down upon. Because why? Because there are children that are pairing up with these children to be their friends, and they play soccer together, basketball, music, hip hop, bowling. They have a teen scene for teenagers. So typical teenagers with non-typical teenagers get together, and they dance and they laugh and they have a carnival. There's so many different things. So if you could help, that would be great. SayFriendship.org/new NY Friendship Circle.com. I thank you. It's really a great organization. God bless. Forgive, forget, and move on. Be well.